Okay, so before this episode starts, I just want to give a fair bit of warning. This is actually going to be a two-parter. I initially wanted this to be a normal episode. It's going to be half an hour, but with the amount of news and just how the conversation went, this episode ended up being an hour long. So I have split the cinema chat into episode 4A, which you are listening to now, and then the next part, the free chat, which will be on the NBA, will be 4B, episode 4B, about the NBA. So, if you're wondering why there's two episodes, that's the reason why. Just a heads up. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Chin-Quee Chats, the bite-sized podcast where we talk sports, movies, and everything in between. I am your host, Matthew Chin-Quee, and today I have a guest with me, Mr. Josh Sazin. How are you doing, Josh?
Hey, thanks for having me on, man.
No problem. It's kind of been a long time coming because, I've been talking about doing a podcast for a while, and we're always talking on Twitter, which is, for the most part, where we're interacting. So
right.
we actually met each other for those who are wondering, and I don't know if anybody's actually really wondering, but I'm going to say it anyways. For those who are wondering, we met in a Facebook group called Movie Talk by Movie Fans Collider Council, which a lot of you listeners are familiar with. And there was this Twitter master post where we started posting our Twitters, and I ended up following him there, and we found that we have very similar tastes in terms of sports and films. We have that we're very passionate about those things around the same levels, although we support different teams and we like different films. We're always having these almost cordial debates. We don't agree on everything, but it's respectful, unlike a lot of other comment sections. I don't know. You would agree with that, right, Josh?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, toxic are 90% of the comment sections that you see, and it's good to actually have somebody you could have a logical, understanding conversation with somebody about just anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of rare to find on the internet.
It is. Like, you're from the Boston area, and
right.
For those who know me, I have a seething hate for Boston sports teams. It's in my blood as a Toronto sports fan, because a lot of our teams are rivals with them. So we obviously are on different ends of the spectrum for sports fans, but we have a good amount of respect, and we may disagree, but we have good arguments here and there.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the times, sometimes we have mutual hatred or desire for things to happen in the sports world that'll benefit both teams still. So,
yeah.
That's not all bad.
Yeah, like a hatred for the Yankees.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't, if something Red Sox and Blue Jays fans can come together on, it's hatred for the Yankees and vice versa. So
push them as far down in the East as possible.
Exactly. Although they did just win today but they did lose 7 in a row, so that's a good thing, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they're starting to show their early summer slowing down part before the All-Star break, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Judge isn't slowing down, but we will get to the sports talk later. I don't know if we're going to have time to talk about MLB on this episode, but we will definitely get to the sports talk later. But for now, let's get into the cinema chat. And for this week, yesterday, some huge news came out. The directors on Han Solo, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are probably best known for directing the Lego Movie and 21 and 22 Jump Street, they exited, and what we later learned, they were fired from the Han Solo film. So, Josh, what do you think about that news?
Yeah, I was shocked. I was actually not really paying attention to the internet. I opened Twitter last night, and that's the first thing I see is they left Han Solo. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they've been filming since around January, beginning of the year.
They started principal photography in February, so they're well into it.
Right, and it's just kind of odd to hear, especially with how tight ship Lucasfilm has been running for the past few years since they kind of did this whole relaunch. So it was really surprising. I mean, I didn't expect it personally, but you start to hear all these all different things about how they're fired, how they have creative differences. It's a bunch of rumors right now, but I mean, it's anybody's guess right now as to
Yeah,
what actually is happening.
that Variety article that came out and that first revealed that they were actually fired, that they didn't leave due to creative differences. It was really strange. Like, there was a quote in there that I kept reading over and over because that couldn't be right. That Kathleen Kennedy was clashing with them the entire time. She didn't even like the way they folded their socks, apparently, which sounds like something that would be in a clickbait article, but it's from Variety, which is one of the most reputable sites. Um,
Yeah.
it The whole situation is really strange because,
It just has a very unsettling vibe.
yeah,
I mean,
especially
nothing about it seems like it should be happening, which is really odd.
and especially on like you said with Disney, they're only they've had some problems with their productions with these latest films with the Josh Trank debacle, but I think that's more of the negative press that Josh Trank was getting, and they kind of pushed him out. And then the Rogue One troubles, which really didn't even turn out to be that bad because the film turned out well. But this is something that's for the most part pretty unheard of. Like a
Yeah,
film that's almost done shooting and they're kicked off.
right. And I mean, even like you said with the Josh Trank situation a couple years ago, at least that movie was just, I mean, we didn't even know what that movie was. They
Yeah.
were far off from in like any sort of production whatsoever. So that's understandable. I get that around that time, I got all that flack in the press for Fantastic Four. But like we were just saying, I mean, this far into production, if you're kicking off your team of directors, you just got to wonder why. And unfortunately, we don't really know the actual answer right now.
Yeah, and that is all we can do right now is speculate. So let's actually get into some speculating now. There is one big name that's being rolled around there. I don't know if it's on your list of who you want to direct to the Han Solo film.
Yeah.
So we each both picked two. Josh, you want to go ahead and give your first one?
Yeah. So one of my picks, I chose Chad Stahelski, who did the first two John Wick movies.
Mhm.
I think that with him, he has a really good sense of stunts, really good action vibe. But he focused on John Wick in both those movies as a character, like as a leading man. I feel like he would be good for this whole setup of a universe within the Star Wars universe. So that was one of my picks. I think he would do a really good job.
Well, he's only done John Wick. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think anybody who's listening on this podcast, they know I don't fact check, so I'm just gonna say he only did John Wick. So I wonder if he was brought on,
He was the director of Chapter Two as well.
yeah, how he'd be able to go from the super R-rated, almost to a point cheesy with John Wick, to going to something that's PG-13 and a little bit more serious with Han Solo. But I think that'd be really interesting, especially with how well they handled just the character of John Wick and obviously the way he handled action.
And I'll throw this at you too. When you mentioned the switch from like R-rated to more family friendly, same could be said about the Lord and Miller Lego Movie,
But
and
that's true.
so you never know. I mean, these guys, those two proved that they can do. They did what? Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Lego Movie, and in between two Jump Street movies. So you never know, I guess.
Yeah, that's actually a really good
It all
point of view.
depends on what. Yeah, it all depends on what the director's up for.
So for my first pick, I went pretty basic, but this is something it's been floating around since the original trilogy. So I picked Spielberg, and the reason why I think Spielberg is not only one of the better choices creative wise, but also business wise, he makes sense because he's so involved in Disney family right now, and he's so involved with the Lucasfilm. And this, from what we've seen, from the information we know, it's such a mess. And bringing in a veteran like Spielberg, someone who he knows the Star Wars universe. He's been involved with it since the beginning, and he knows how to work with actors well. And he could come in and right the ship as just someone, as almost, for lack of a better phrase, a pillar of strength in there, coming in and fixing a troubled production, and that would also be his introduction as a full director in the Star Wars universe. I think that it could be interesting to see Spielberg come on. I don't know how it would fit in his schedule, but
Yeah, I know. I know. As of right now, he's working on that the Pentagon Papers movie that's actually due out in December, so he's probably busy with that.
Yeah, he's probably working
And
hard on that.
he's probably finishing up or working on post production on Ready Player One too.
Did they already start shooting that?
I
Or
thought,
that?
but I mean, I haven't really heard anything. I just thought that they had started already because it's due out in March, I think. So they must have,
Yeah.
unless they're gonna push that back.
Yeah, the only way I see him coming on, and again, it's a long shot, especially with the director whose name has been floating around. I don't know if you picked him yet, so I'm not going to say it yet. But the director that his name has been thrown in the hat. But who's your second pick?
Second pick, I kind of went more for the comedy, family friendly vibe, and I chose Chris McKay, who just did Lego Batman movie.
So okay?
Yeah, I mean, I was just throwing around names. I thought who just came off fresh, really well accepted movies and did a really good job. I just picked him. He kind of has the same Lord and Miller vibe. So actually, now hearing that they were fired, I threw this list together earlier. Maybe that they would clash just like Lord and Miller. So I don't really know. That's just a name that came to mind.
Well, Chris Miller is also he's more of a rookie director compared to those two.
Right.
So I hate using this word bullied with studios, but from what we've been hearing is that Lord and Miller, they disagreed a lot and they wanted more of their vision while Disney wanted their Star Wars vision, their definitive Star Wars vision. And if they brought on Chris McKay, he might be a little bit easier to manipulate. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I'll give you that. I feel like that's true now that you mention it. So I'll throw another name out here. We don't have to discuss it, but I'll go with a simple pick too, Matthew Vaughn.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Matthew Vaughn.
He was my number 3, but we were doing top 2s. But I'll just throw his name there.
Yeah, Vaughn is he's one of my favorite directors. As far as I'm concerned, he hasn't made a bad movie. I don't love all of his movies, but he does make great movies, especially great blockbusters too. Like he makes great fun movies.
Yeah, he kind of almost makes these like sleeper box office hits.
Yeah,
I mean, you think about it, like Kingsman, Kick-Ass, those are just 2 of them. X-Men First Class, they weren't really like these huge movies, but they were still really good and they were considered blockbusters.
And the one that I don't love, Layer Cake, a lot of people do love it, and it's a lot more serious and not more blockbusters. So it shows that he can do that drama too. He can play in both worlds.
Yeah.
And a Han Solo Star Wars movie likely would want to play a little bit in both worlds. You don't want a full on comedy. You don't want something a little bit too serious either. So I like Matthew Vaughn as a choice.
Yeah. What about your other pick?
I went with another one who's in the Star Wars universe, Frank Oz, as a director.
Cool.
And the reason I picked him is because I know he's really good with comedy, like he did Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and he's a good director, and he's familiar with the universe again. If I was Disney, I would because of all that, like I said, the reason why I picked Spielberg earlier is because of what's going on with this production, and it's so close to finishing, and it's they're almost at post. You want to pick someone who you have a good working relationship with, and Oz is already in the family. He's still involved with the family. He maintains a good relationship, and he's a good director to boot. So that's why I picked him as well.
Yeah, I feel like when you're saying people who are close to the Star Wars family, I've seen a lot of people commenting that Lawrence Kasdan should just come in. I mean, he wrote it, and people are saying he should come in and finish the directing part. I don't think it's a bad choice. I think he wouldn't have been one of my choices, but like you said, if you want to tighten it, someone who's always been with the franchise, he's another go-to.
Yeah, he was another name that I considered, but I looked at his filmography, and he hasn't directed too much.
But that's the thing that was keeping me back, is that he's been more involved with the writing and the creative processes with the Star Wars franchise rather than actually behind the camera.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think all of those are solid picks. But if you want to go ahead and reveal who the rumored, I've heard of 2. I know the big one that you're talking about. I've heard of 2. They were in one report, but why don't you go ahead and say that? Yeah,
so Ron Howard's name has been floating around there, and His last movie was that whale movie, right?
Yeah, in the heart of the sea. I actually I saw AMC Stubbs did a free preview screening. I think that's the only reason that would have gotten me to the theater to see it. I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah, the last movie I enjoyed from him was Rush, and that was
Oh,
4 years ago now. But that was a great movie, and he is a
yeah.
great director.
I will fight till I'm blue in the face, saying that Rush is one of the most underrated movies of the 21st century.
Yeah, a lot of people don't talk about it when they're
Got
talking about
no
some of the
love.
best movies of the decade.
Yeah, it got no love in award season, and it came out right in I think October, and just got completely ignored. It was fantastic, just performances, direction, writing, everything. And I'll, like I said, I'll argue with you about it. It's one of the underrated films I've seen in a while.
Yeah, I won't be arguing with you at all because I just saw it a few months ago for the first time actually, and I loved it. Um,
Yeah, it's
all
just
the
so intense too.
Yeah, it is, and for something that I'm not the biggest racing guy. It really got me enthralled in just the world of racing. It really got me invested in that world that Ron Howard built and the rivalry that he had between the two characters. But um, we're gonna move on now. As I stated before, you are from the Boston area, correct?
Right? Yeah, spent
Now
a lot of time in the city.
I actually have too. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of time, but I visited it twice, and I really love the city as a
Yeah.
whole. But what I really love is visiting the city in cinematic form. And if I was to list my my top favorite cinematic cities, Boston would absolutely be at my number one. There's a lot of great films that are set in the Boston area. So for this episode, we decided to talk about our top 5 films based in Boston. So we've each done our research and got a list. Josh, do you want to start with your number 5?
Yeah, so I was throwing together my list, and it's actually cool because I'd say Boston is definitely one of my favorite cinematic cities too. Mainly for the aesthetic that I live here, so seeing stuff that I'm familiar with on screen is really cool. I definitely throw it up there in my top 3 favorite cities that movies take place in. So, number 5, I picked Gone Baby Gone. It's Ben Affleck's first directorial debut. Casey Affleck, Morgan Freeman, they star in it. I think that's a really good crime thriller. It takes place kind of in the outskirts of Boston and kind of the suburbs, but it's Boston.
Yeah, Affleck is going to pop up a lot on these lists, I think, because he's another one of those actors who seems to be really loyal to the area. Want to say 4 out of 5, I think. Only Argo hasn't taken place in Boston out of all the films that he's directed.
Right.
So he certainly loves the city as well as a cinematic setting. Gone Baby Gone is actually my number 3 because I love the noir, the almost neo noir aspects of the film and the mystery aspect, and there is a good twist at the end too, with great directing and great acting and a really compelling story.
Okay. I'd say this list was pretty hard for me to place above and below each other just because there's a lot of great films that take place in this city, but Gone Baby Gone is one of the greats, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. I had to leave a few really great films off of there, mostly because I wanted my unconventional pick. I don't know, or maybe it is conventional. I don't know. Maybe you might have it on the list, but I actually have number 5 is Ted.
Okay, yeah, I considered it. It's definitely a Boston movie.
Yeah, it is with Ted, that vulgar teddy bear, and Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, you spend you spend the entire movie in the city, but you see like Fenway Park and the downtown area and everything.
I mean, the climax of the film, it takes place in Fenway Park,
Right.
which is
Yeah, well,
obviously.
it's definitely a conventional pick if you want to if you were to throw that on a Boston list, I don't think anyone would bat an eye.
Yeah, I think it's a great comedy, and I really love how they kind of resurrected the guy who played Flash Gordon. His name is escaping me. They kind of resurrected his career with that.
Yeah, kidding.
But like the premise it's so ridiculous, and then when you see a swearing teddy bear on screen, just walking around smoking weed and just like taking shits on floors. You can't help but laugh, and there's actually a decent story in there as well. You can't say as much about Ted 2, although there are some great moments in Ted 2, but Ted 1 is definitely, I think, it's a great film, especially a great comedy.
Absolutely. I think it's one of my favorite comedies in the last few years, too.
So number 4.
Yeah, my number 4, it's a really recent one. I put Patriots Day.
Mm-hmm.
You want to talk about a representation of Boston in cinema? That's Patriots Day right there. Another Mark Wahlberg film, but regardless, I mean that movie, Mark Wahlberg and the director's name, Peter Berg. They've made some incredible movies. Patriots Day had a lot of controversy going towards it. It's 3 years after the bombing, so people were saying like, oh, they're cashing in. Handled with care for somebody who lived in the area through that. They definitely didn't make it this unnecessary action movie. It was more of a drama thriller, which was the correct way to go, and it seemed to have a lot of truthful aspects to it. And like I said, just living here, that's like as clear of a Boston representation in a movie you're gonna get.
Yeah, I can't speak to how accurate it was, but if you're giving it, if you're giving it a Bostonian's endorsement, that speaks leagues about the film. And I really love the film, and I was one of the people who, I wouldn't say I was very vocal about it, but it did bother me a little bit that I heard that they were adapting a film. But when I did see it, and how respectful, and it celebrated the city, and showed that city was really their one city, they're Boston strong. Not many films make me cry, but at the end of that, when they went from the actors to the footage of the guy finishing the marathon who did lose his leg, that got to me. It really was a great celebration of the city, and the city coming together in a really terrible, tough time, with great acting.
Yeah, I mean that movie, you hit the nail on the head. Respect is probably the one word I would use to describe how that film was handled. I think especially with Peter Berg and Mark Wahlberg, this is like the third or fourth true life adaptation that they've done. And each time, I mean, Lone Survivor, Deepwater Horizon, Patriots Day, they're all handled with respect. They never seem flashy. They never seem like they're out to get money. They're out to tell stories that actually happened. Instead of doing a documentary, they make Mark Wahlberg live through it.
And what I really liked about the film as well is that while it did obviously and rightfully so portray the terrorists in a bad light, it wasn't necessarily pushing an agenda hard when they really could have in the political landscape that the America and the world is in right now, and they didn't push that hard. They really decided to focus on the characters and how the event affected them, and I really appreciated that because it would have been so easy for them to make a political message there.
Yeah, it would have been super easy, and I'm glad they didn't as well. But and I think the reason that they didn't is because this movie takes place within like the first 48 or 72 hours that within the events, and I don't think really politically, aside from if you're watching 24/7 news, that there were really that many political statements going on that they could have focused on. So I'm glad that they just went for a straight up story.
And just as a side note, my favorite scene in that film is when they're chasing, or they've finally tracked down the terrorists, and all the cops are there, and they're outside a house, and some guy pops his head out the door. He's like, "What are you doing out here?" And it's like, "We found the guys." Just throws a bat at them. He's like, "Give them hell for me." I love it.
You hear stories, especially like I said, living in this area, you hear stories, and that's what those citizens were doing. People were rooting for the cops. They were sitting on their windows and on their porches and, just really waiting on a minute by minute basis. But that's what the whole aspect of Boston Strong was, is that all these citizens were coming together to pitch in and do their part.
And that really warms my heart.
We captured that really well.
I love seeing, not even just a city, but people like that coming together. It really gives me faith in the world. It makes me a little bit happier.
Yeah, so much needed sense of hope.
So my number 4 is The Fighter, another Mark Wahlberg movie. We're getting up there with Mark
Yeah.
Wahlberg. But yeah, although I did say it's a Mark Wahlberg movie, there are arguments that it is a Christian Bale movie as well. And who doesn't like a good boxing movie? Rocky is one of my favorite films of all time, and while The Fighter isn't Rocky, and it's not even necessarily about the fight itself, it's really a drama about brothers, and as someone who's pretty close to his brothers, it really hit me hard, because of how it's a complicated relationship between the two. They love each other, but they also clash, and they also have very different ideals and outlooks and experiences on life. And I really like how that fighter explored that.
Yeah, me too. David O. Russell, he gets a lot of hit or miss movies with fans and critics, but The Fighter, I think, is definitely one of his best so far. That would have been my sixth pick because that was a wild card that I was waiting on. But Fighter, Christian Bale, he was the star of that movie. I think he deserved more recognition than he got. But again, from my experience with them, I think fighting movies, boxing movies, they're like 90% of the time they're awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really recall too many movies that about boxing or fighting that are just straight up garbage. I think they have their unique spins on it when you wouldn't really expect most of them. You might see that's the type of sport that you might see getting old after a bunch of movies, but they always have their way of freshening it up.
Well, considering the fact that any way you end a boxing movie, if the fighter wins, it's like Rocky 2. If the fighter loses, but he becomes the people's champs, it's Rocky 1. Because Rocky is such an iconic movie and paved the way for sports, not only boxing movies, but sports overall, you're always going to get those comparisons. So the fact that the Hollywood keeps pushing out boxing movies that continue to be good, it makes me happy because they're great films.
Yeah, I mean, I like even the movie. I'm not sure if you saw it. Came out later last year, but Bleed for This with Miles Teller.
I haven't had a chance yet.
Yeah, I mean, even that's terrific, and that's another Boston. I mean, it's more so Boston and Providence, but that's another New England area boxing movie. But I even like that, and that's one of the ones that flew under a lot of people's radars.
So number 3, what do you? I've already revealed my number 3. What do you have?
Yeah, so my number 3 was The Town. Another Ben Affleck movie. I was just catching some of it on cable right before we were talking, but yeah, that's a great action movie. That's a great thriller. It really gives a representation of the gritty part of Boston, Charlestown, and everything. But yeah, I mean, great performances from a very underrated cast, I think, between Affleck and Jeremy Renner, Rebecca Hall, even John Hamm's in there. You forget that at the time. But yeah, that's my number 3. I think it's terrific.
Yeah, The Town is actually my number 1.
Okay.
And it's in my top 5 of all time. I adore this film, and that's not just because Ben Affleck is my favorite working actor. I don't think he's the best actor out there. He's a great actor, but I don't think he's the greatest actor out there. But he is my favorite in combination with his directing, because I've liked all his directorial efforts. But what I really like about The Town is, again, with the underrated actors, Jeremy Renner, he's in so many movies, but I still think he continues to be underrated. Like, a lot of people don't have him up there as one of the best actors in the industry, when I think he is one of, if not the best supporting actor working today right now. Anytime he pops up in a role, in a supporting role, he really elevates the film, and he is the absolute standout character in this film. From the moment where Doug comes into his room and says, "I need you to hurt someone," and you can't say anything, and he just goes, "Whose car are we taking?" Or
favorite movie quotes of all time.
I know, and that's real brotherhood. That's when you have a friend like that. That's when you know you got it good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the love story in it, because it's not cheesy, and it's not. It doesn't have a happy ending. Spoilers, but this movie's been out for a while. But it feels real, and it feels natural and organic. And Rebecca Hall is also one of the most underrated actresses. If you haven't seen Christine, which came out last year, she really should have been nominated for an Oscar for that, and the studio botched the marketing for that, because she is incredible in that film. But Rebecca Hall is also great in The Town, and I feel like if the FBI listen to this, might get in trouble, but I love the idea of heists.
Yeah, no, I mean, heist films are some of the best action films. That's just plain and simple.
And the way they plan the heists in these films, it doesn't seem super convoluted or something that would be really Hollywood or really movie-esque. It seems like this is something that can and would happen. To the point where when they do pull their most complicated heist at the very end with at Fenway Park, that's the one where they get caught because it is the most complicated, and shows that life crime isn't all that glorious.
Yeah, no, I mean that final act of that movie is definitely a heart-pounding one.
Yeah.
I mean that heist, like you said, it's just so messed up and so complicated that it's bound to fail, but you're just watching, hoping for the best.
Mm-hmm. And you're cheering for the bad guys.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
All right, so number 2.
Yeah, my number 2, kind of I don't know if it's an unconventional one, but I chose Mystic River. Mystic River is fantastic. Clint Eastwood film from probably 15 years ago now. Has Kevin Bacon, Tim Robbins, and
Sean Penn.
Sean Penn, yeah. And that's a movie that got a lot of Oscar attention, and much deserved. I think that's another really gritty crime mystery side of Boston, but Boston nonetheless, man.
Mm-hmm. I almost had that at my number 5 because I really like this movie as well. It falls along similar lines with Gone Baby Gone, with involving someone's child and involving, like you said, the gritty crime, the crime aspect of Boston. And Sean Penn is really great in this role. There's the one scene that a lot of people point to when they're talking about Mystic River, when he finds out his daughter was killed, and that's a really, really powerful scene.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, from there on, it's just kind of an unraveling of what the movie led up to, and it's handled so well by Eastwood. It's fantastic.
And again, another film that doesn't have a happy ending, and it's one of those films where you, as an audience member, you know what the real story is behind it, and you can't do a thing about it, and it's heart-wrenching just to see Sean Penn's character committing something and doing something that you know could have been avoided, and Tim Robbins' character facing punishment for something he definitely didn't do, and because he was traumatized as a child.
Right, and it just goes back to what you said about, one, you have like a brotherly type relationship, but this movie really tests those limits and actually shows how people can turn on each other rather than stick together. It's actually one of the few movies I think that it won Best Leading Actor and Supporting. I don't think too many movies have won for both of those categories in the same movie.
And it also, I mean, talking about this, the Best Supporting Actor, I think Tim Robbins did win for that, and a lot of people attribute his quote-unquote masterpiece to Shawshank, but I think he's actually better in this role.
Yeah, I definitely say so too, because I personally, when watching Shawshank, I'm focused on Morgan Freeman's performance.
Yeah.
You're definitely, you have nowhere else to focus but Tim Robbins, in my opinion.
Yeah, with Shawshank, Tim Robbins, he's great in it, but he doesn't show as much range as he does in this film.
Right.
He's portraying someone who has PTSD, who's frail, who's weak, who's emotionally scarred, he has all these issues, who's still trying to make it in this world, and he does it really well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'd say he's definitely deserving of the Oscar that he won.
Oh, for sure. I wish we saw more of him. He hasn't done as much lately.
Yeah, but when you think about it, definitely going to go down in history for those few movies that he did really shine in.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's undoubtedly.
So my number 2 is Good Will Hunting.
Okay, cool.
And that's
up for that movie.
Yeah, another Ben Affleck film. Well, I guess it's not really his film, but he stars in it, and he and Matt Damon did write it. Although there is rumors that Kevin Smith did do some touch-ups for it, but nevertheless they won their Oscar for it. And Robin Williams puts on a performance that is absolutely one of his best performances.
Oh, absolutely.
Same with Matt Damon. I don't think Matt Damon's been as good in a film ever since. Again, another emotional story, and this one isn't. This one isn't really a crime driven at all. This is more of a drama and a character drama and dealing with someone who's blessed with gifts, with a talent, but hasn't been brought up in an environment that allows him to see that to its full potential. And again, the romance angle interwoven into the film is really great as well.
Yeah, the film is about relationships and how Matt Damon's character is kind of thrown into a bunch of these situations, but unknowingly makes the best of it, even though he doesn't want anything to do with it half the time. Robin Williams, I mean, we're talking about Best Supporting Actor. That is probably my favorite performance of his career. I mean, he's heartbreaking in that film. He's amazing. And you look back at it, I was watching it recently, and since his death a few years ago, it makes you almost want to break down and cry.
Yeah, especially with how he died, and you go back and watch the iconic "It's Not Your Fault" scene, and you can't help but get emotional during that scene because with him, who knows, maybe he needed someone to say "It's not your fault" with that, and I'm getting emotional just thinking about it.
Yeah, no, one of my favorite performances of all time, and that's just no further explanation required.
No, yeah, you just got to watch the film, and you'll know why this film is so revered.
Oh, absolutely. I'll save some time. That's my number one. So we already talked about it. So,
okay.
So that's a given right there. So if you want to go ahead and give yours.
Yeah. So as I said before, my number one's The Town. So I guess we kind of got through our list.
Yeah.
We're not going to top 10 and try to debate and try to make one, make a definitive list, but again, there are a lot of films that have been left out. There are some other great Boston films. We didn't even touch The Departed.
Yeah, that was a gamble for me. I almost had it on, but I've seen better personally, and that's what I gave on my list.
I actually agree. And this is probably a topic for another time, but I like Scorsese, but I'm not in love with Scorsese's films.
Yeah, maybe part 2 of this of me and you will be our 6 to 10.
Yeah. So that, I think, is going to close out the Cinema Chat segment. We're going to take a little break and then come back to talk about the NBA. This is probably going to be a longer episode. I forgot to mention that at the beginning because there is so much to talk about in the NBA right now. It's just an absolute shitfest right now in the best way possible.
Yeah. This is the busy season. This is like Santa in his workshop right now.
Yeah. So we will be right back.